Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Now, if you think you know Helen Keller just from the story of Anne Sullivan and the water pump, well, our mission today is definitely for you. We're aiming to go beyond that, that familiar image, explore her intellectual achievements, her global influence, and her really powerful, actually quite radical political activism.
That's exactly right. I mean, the source material paints a picture of someone who just refused to be defined by those early immense challenges. We're sort of distilling how Keller, despite getting sick at 19 months, an illness that left her deaf and blind, permanently became this world-renowned author and advocate and really one of the most unexpected radical thinkers of her time.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, her foundation.
Yeah.
She was born June 27, 1880, Tuscumbia, Alabama. And that illness, it struck so early it led to years of, well, intense frustration. By age 7, she was communicating using over 60 home signs she'd made up.
Yeah.
But her world was still incredibly small, isolated.
Yeah, but what's fascinating even then is the persistence, right? Her mother, she'd heard about Laura Bridgman's education and got inspired. She consulted specialists, and that eventually led them to Alexander Graham Bell. He pointed them towards the Perkins Institute, and that's how Anne Sullivan came into her life, the intervention that, well, changed everything.
And that meeting, March 5th, 1887, that was the moment. Keller herself called it my soul's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
That famous scene at the pump, when WATER, the word, finally clicked with the feeling of the water. She remembered it as living word awakened my soul, gave it light, hope, set it free. Just wow, that revelation really powered a lifetime of achievement.
Absolutely. And that drive for communication, it just defined her whole educational journey. She achieved things people thought were completely impossible. She learned to speak, she mastered American Braille, and she used the Tadoma method. That's a technique where she'd feel a speaker's lips and throat to understand the vibrations. Incredible focus.
And all that tireless effort, it really paid off academically. She graduated from Radcliffe College in 1904. She was 24. Think about that. The first deaf-blind person ever to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. It's a massive triumph. And interestingly, her education, it was paid for by Henry Huddleston Rogers, the Standard Oil magnate.
Right, and that financial connection is important context. Keller became this really prolific author, wrote 12 books, including her autobiography, The Story of My Life. But then she sort of transitioned into her real life's work decades as a fierce activist and a global speaker.
Okay, wait, so how does someone whose education was bankrolled by, one of the richest men in America end up a fierce anti-capitalist or radical socialist? This is where the story gets, well, really interesting and moves way past that simple inspirational narrative you usually hear.
Well, it connects right back to her own experiences. She became absolutely convinced that the isolation and suffering she endured weren't just her problems. They were reflections of, systemic societal failures. She pretty quickly became a Christian socialist, a suffragist, and a really staunch pacifist.
And she didn't just believe it, she acted on it. In 1909, she joined the Socialist Party of America. Then, in 1912, the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, or Wobblies. And you have to understand, the IWW was a radical anti-capitalist labor union. They fought for workers' control. That shows you her level of commitment, doesn't it? She also co-founded the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU.
Exactly. And the core lesson she leaves us, I think, is how she used her own disability to expose social injustice more broadly. She argued, and this is one of her key insights from the sources, that a lot of physical blindness was actually, quote, traceable to wrong industrial conditions, bad working conditions, poor sanitation. So that led her to champion public health reforms, like pushing for disinfectant eye drops for newborns to prevent blindness caused by infections at birth.
Yeah, and to really show her conviction against economic inequality, she left us with this incredibly powerful quote. She said, "The few own the many. The country is governed for the richest, for the corporations, the bankers, the land speculators, and for the exploiters of labor." I mean, she was completely uncompromising.
And the pushback was immediate, wasn't it? When she got political, especially radically so, critics, like the editor of the Brooklyn Eagle newspaper, publicly questioned her intelligence. They basically argued her disabilities made her incapable of understanding complex politics. Her response was legendary. She just retorted that they were the ones who were socially blind and deaf.
So what does all this mean for us today? Keller went from this isolated child in Alabama to a globally celebrated advocate. She met every U.S. president from Cleveland right up to Johnson. She even introduced the Akita dog breed to America, fun fact. Her legacy really forces us to reevaluate what we mean by triumph.
Right. Because while Keller is and should be celebrated as an icon of individual triumph over adversity, we need to remember her own words, the nuance she brought. She insisted her success was helped by advantages of birth and environment. She specifically noted the power to rise is not within the reach of everyone, a crucial point.
That is a really powerful final thought. It makes you think, doesn't it? We encourage you, the listener, to consider maybe what systemic injustices, what forms of social blindness exist in our world today that a modern Helen Keller would immediately call out and challenge. Thanks for diving deep with us today.